Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 6 of the Bright Star Intuitive Painting series. Today, our goal is to finish the bubble in the background. I've never made a bubble like this in this style before, so I'm very much just playing around with this and hoping that we end up with something that looks kind of like a bubble in the end. This painting isn't necessarily anything that I would consider art for anything other than my own pleasure, my own fun, my curiosity. So I'm definitely not aiming for perfection. I'm just experimenting, see what I can discover before I get started on a more serious intuitive painting series. So we are going to get started. So one of the downsides of me starting this intuitive painting and then getting distracted and family obligations and visiting and vacations is that I don't actually remember the colors that I used when I started this, but I do believe that the blue that I'm using in the background is phthalo blue. So that is the blue that I am going to go with and hope that it works. So the moment that I started putting the Mars black on the canvas, I realized that in the original painting 2 months ago, I was using a black that's created from phthalo blue and cab red deep. And so this black, it's going to be fine on this canvas, but the whole point of me using that phthalo plus red was because I found a cool way to make black on its own. And I wanted to be able to use that in the painting. And then because this painting took me 2 months, I forgot about it. So I'm just starting with the smaller bubble. I'm going to just put essentially the dark outline on the top, and then I'm going to fill it in with black about a third of the way through, and um, it's going to kind of fade into the regular phthalo blue and then the lighter colors. And I'm using a reference painting, kind of a combination of reference paintings that I got from Google. And so it's not a step-by-step tutorial. It's more of I've looked at a few pictures and can kind of see where the colors are um, are laid out and how it's laid out. So now that I've got the black in the top third, it's a mix of just straight Mars black and then a little 50-50 phthalo. I'm gonna keep with the dark on the paintbrush and I'm gonna make the shadow that goes behind the bubble. So when light hits the bubble in paintings, and these the paintings that I'm referencing, the light source is actually at the top where the darkest part of the bubble, and the shadow of the bubble itself is at the bottom. And so I'm putting a shadow behind my little bubble. Also, as I just said, my little bubble, it made me sound like kind of like a 5-year-old, like a kid. I don't know what it is about the word bubble. It just sounds childish and cute and adorable. And now I kind of want to just say bubble, bubble, bubble. So next from the camera, you can see that there's this very hard line between the black and that medium blue. I'm going to go through and just take the fine brush and kind of blend them back and forth, kind of just swishing back and forth, adding a little bit of water to the brush, trying to get those two colors to blend a little bit more so that it's a little bit more smooth. Um, at this point in the painting, I know that once the bubbles are done and the lily is done, this painting is done. So doing some of these fine-tuning detail work is appropriate, and it's probably why this video takes quite a bit longer because I am doing a lot of that detail work. So the next color is going to be kind of halfway between that medium blue and white, so very, very pale blue. And same process, I'm going to get it right up next to the blue, blend them, and then the final process will just be simply adding the white to the bottom and blending it. The final step for the bubble is to add the actual light reflection on the dark part. And I'm going with the simplest version that I could see in my reference photos, and it's a big dot in the middle and two little dots on the side. And I think it ends up looking like a pretty darn good bubble at the end. The next step is to recreate this bubble with the big bubble. And so I'm going to flip the canvas and start by painting the edge of the canvas with just plain black. And I decide to go over that little tiny mauve piece in the middle just for simplicity's sake. It's a little bit more visually appealing to just have kind of one big blob that's going off the canvas. And to be honest, it's pretty easy. It's way easier for me to keep to have that top part be black. If you're newer to painting acrylic paintings on canvas, uh, flipping over the canvas is just one of those tricks that I've used since I started, and it's just an easy way to to work with the canvas as is. For this part, I'm working on mid-ground painting, even background painting. It's just a lot easier to just flip the canvas and then get the edges. If you're working with a board canvas, obviously you don't have that issue as much, but for the wraparound canvases, it's just easier to flip it around so that you can work with everything. So the next part is to kind of get the proportions of the bubble similar to the other bubble. So in my little bubble, I have five distinct colors, and I just happen to have five fingers. And so those five fingers work as five places where I can make the lines. Now, I happen to be right-handed, so it's not going to work for me to use my right hand as my reference. So I need to use my left hand with my broken thumb as my reference. And I'm going to just sketch in all of those lines for where they go for the bubble so that they're kind of equally distant apart. Now that I have those lines drawn on, I can flip the canvas again so that I'm working from the bottom of the canvas. It's just easier. The place, the colors that I'm working with and the paint that I'm working with is closer to my body, and that just makes it easier to work with. So now when I make these videos, I just kind of talk to myself and talk about what's on my mind. Not really talking to myself. I am narrating the video and talking about what I'm doing in the painting. But every once in a while, I kind of come up with fun things um, that I can talk about while I'm making this painting. And so one of the things that um, I bring up again, I talked about this in the last video, is that perfectionist detail work. So when we're coming to places like the boundaries between these two colors where there needs to be some blending, that's kind of detail work. So this is mid-ground painting. So the background is the sky, very loosey-goosey, very messy. This is the middle ground. It's not the focus of the painting, but there's just enough details where if you're off a little, it's pretty noticeable. So when you have perfectionist tendencies, um, this blending and mixing, it's very detailed and it's fun. And I have some perfectionist tendencies, and so I like doing this stuff. The downside is it does take a while. This video took me an hour to record. I'm heavily editing it, just speeding it up so that you guys can see it more quickly. One of the things that I noticed while I'm painting, when I'm going back and looking at the transcript of the video, I notice there's a lot of downtime because I tend to get into a flow state when I'm painting, and I don't really have, I don't, it's hard for me to consciously think about what I'm going to say or what I'm talking about or ideas that are coming to my mind. I really am just focused intently on the painting itself. And, that's a really good frame of mind to be in if you ever just need a break to get into a flow state. I find that when I'm writing or when I'm painting, I'm also a college professor. So I find that when I'm working on my lesson plans, um, time just seems to sneak away from me when I get into those flow states. And it's a really fun place to be. They can be very exhausting, but they're really cool. If you ever need a break, so getting into a flow state is kind of a fun thing to do. So this is still an intuitive painting, and that means there's a lot of room for like errors are very forgiving. However, now that I'm getting into the middle and foreground and getting close to painting to the lily, I am being a little bit more careful and taking my time and just being a little bit more intentional with every brushstroke. Um, I do think that this will be the last day that I paint on this, or no, I'll have one more day after this. As soon as the foreground or the background, wow, as soon as the lily is done, we'll be done with this painting. Now, as I reflect and look at this really bright, brilliant blue, this phthalo blue is very cool and watery, and I think about the warm tiger lily that's going to be kind of sitting on top of it. I think it's going to be a really beautiful contrast. One thing that I've noticed about this painting is that um, I, if I hadn't taken such long breaks in between painting this, I might have never imagined having the bubble in the background. I definitely saw the lily almost immediately, but I might not have seen the bubble, and it might have ended up looking much different than it's going to end up. And I think that's really important with all paintings is sometimes you need to step away from them either for a short time or even just a quick distance to see um, kind of just get a different perspective on them, going away from a painting and coming back a few days later or a few weeks later. It is really helpful for getting new perspective. However, the next series coming up is grant funded. There is a time limit. I do have to have everything done by, I believe, April, and at least 5 of the paintings need to be done by December because they are being painted for charity groups that need them for their silent auctions. And so um, there isn't going to be that big gap in time for those paintings. I am going to need to get them done relatively quickly. Um, they are going to be a little bit more on the abstract side than like a bubble and a lily, which require a lot of detail. But when there's a deadline, that's where some of this maybe not overthinking, but definitely a lot of detail work that kind of has to go by the wayside when there's a timeline. So as I am just painting and chit-chatting into the camera and thinking about this painting and where the idea came from, it it came from the idea that I got this artist grant and I was proud of myself and I felt like a bright star, like I was shining like a bright star. And I think in one of the videos I do actually hum the little Bible verse about this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. And I think that when I was growing up, I misinterpreted the sin of pride as not being okay to be proud of myself. And so that is something that I've been thinking about, that there are a lot of people in this world that do really amazing things and maybe they don't necessarily feel that pride of that light that they're bringing to the world. And so it just kind of made me reflect on how important it is to continue to um, celebrate our work and it's a huge honor when people ask for your work. And it just kind of got me thinking about that idea of pride and um, how we should be proud of the good things that we contribute to the world. Making these paintings is very therapeutic for me. Um, Talking about the idea of perfectionism or pride or shame, even just the act of creating and being proud of oneself. Um, this painting to me is it's all about just being playful and experimental. It's you know I think of a lot of YouTubers that are out there, and their goal is to make money, and so their goal is to beat the algorithm, and that not necessarily conducive to making good product. And so for me, I don't have that drawing on me. I'm doing this because I enjoy it and I want to share this art that I have, this flow state that I get into, this creation that I make. I just want to share it. That's it. That's the only motivation is just trying it out. And I think that's really important for people that are maybe interested in trying out painting as a hobby, or maybe younger people who are thinking about making art as a career. Um, my motivations for painting and making videos are completely different. I'm not doing this to be famous. I'm not doing this for money. I'm just doing it because I enjoy the process of painting and the process of editing videos. And um, I think that helps in the perfectionist realm, knowing that these aren't high stakes paintings for me. It doesn't mean that I'm going to allow them to be poorly made. I just like to um, I like to have that freedom. It allows the creativity to flow a little bit better, and I think that makes an overall better painting for me. Now that the big bubble is done, I'm going to add those little dots and add the shadow that goes around the backside of the bubble. At this point in the making of the shadow and the bubble, I'm realizing that there's a shadow that's going to be on the top of the bubble, like towards the light source. And this is just a classic example of something that I am just experimenting with this. I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to making bubbles in this way. And so, I'm just going to go with this is creative license, and we're just going to go with that. We're going to roll with this. It's not perfect. It never was meant to be perfect. It's the idea of a bubble that's just floating on space with a lily on it, very abstract, random, obscure concepts, real things that are kind of just mishmashed together. And I think that that's what makes this particular piece work. I also think it would be hilarious if somebody tried to analyze this painting. And for all of you, you've seen this video, you've watched all of these paintings develop and kind of the intention and motivation behind them, and you know that it is completely random. And I'm imagining some art professor at some very amazing institution looking at my techniques and or the psychology and what I was thinking. I do think that that's kind of a fun little hobby, or a fun little, you know, daydream to have when you're an artist, because a lot of the times we just happen to have the color on our palette, or, we're feeling red for the day, or whatever. It isn't a huge psychological breakthrough of the combination of a star field, a bubble, and a lily. So as I'm looking at the bubble reflection at the top, I absolutely hate it. And so I went to grab the black paint and I accidentally grabbed white paint. So I needed to go back and fully wipe off that white paint. At this point in the video, it's, probably 45 minutes into me recording an hour-long video. I was getting a little loopy and a little tired, and I do think that's kind of funny. But it was relatively easy to wipe it off and paint over it with black, and you can't even tell. So that's it for the Bright Star Intuitive Painting. However, like last week, or last video, I am going to reuse some of my extra paints. So if you want to watch the bonus painting, stay tuned. So for this painting, I just use a mixed media sketchbook. I have just a ton of notebooks that I use for extra paint, and I just play around with them. Sometimes the paintings are definite, like they look like a landscape. The painting I made last week or last video was, it definitely looked like a landscape. This painting ends up looking a little bit more abstract. Sometimes the paintings end up just being backgrounds for another painting that I am going to use in the future. If I have a color combination of paints that I think that would make a really good background, I'll put them onto canvases. So quite a few videos ago, I used a ton of reds, blues, and purples, and I made about 5 or 6 canvases. And those are just backgrounds for future paintings. So as with my previous painting that I did, the last one that I did, I'm going to start with the white in the middle and just kind of go out from there and just very much blend the colors together. It looks kind of like it could be maybe a sunset on a lake. And so I'm just going to kind of go with that vibe to begin with. So at this point, my paper is completely full and all I have left is black. It's not enough to like darken up the sky. And so I honestly didn't know what I was going to do with it. So I just started making some random black lines on both sides of the paper and just kind of playing around. And it ended up being like the paint was starting to dry and get sticky and it kind of got to be a pain to do it that way. So then I got the paint wet and it looks like it ends up looking like what I would do like dry brushing for like if I were painting trees or something. And so I just kind of was playing around with this. It ended up being very abstract, but just kind of a cool like I would argue that this is kind of a skills painting. So I'm practicing my dry brushing on wet paint and kind of messing around with like framing pictures, using the dark black around the edge for framing. So just kind of messing with some skill building in this painting where I'm not wasting any of my paints. That's all I've got for you for this Bright Star intuitive painting, day 6. Day 7 should be the last day of the Bright Star series, so I'm really excited to see where it ends up. And then hopefully you'll join me for the grant funded intuitive painting series. Please remember to like and subscribe and to watch the videos all the way through. Even though I don't do this for viewership, it does give me good feedback on which videos are, you know, liked and not liked and that type of thing. And please remember to comment so I can use that as feedback.